What's up, guys? It's Patricia from TarantulaHeaven.com. Today I wanted to share with you a very cool article that I found on the internet, just randomly Googling stuff about tarantulas for video topics. And it is about tarantulas possibly having a bit of a social life, which is something that I didn't think I would be saying. If I sound weird, I apologize. I do not know what's going on with my voice right now. I imagine I may be getting sick because I do feel a little bit tired in my nose and I've been sneezing. So I'm not really sure what's going on here. I feel well enough to make this video, but in the next few hours I may actually be sick. And oh my gosh, before I get started, this is Spidey. She's eating a cockroach. She's just kind of hanging out. She's the star. But anyway, so the article. It was titled, "Turns out tarantulas hang out with lots of animals." And so I had to read this, and it was on the website IFL Science. I effing love science. You guys know what the other word that I can't say is. And that's generally a pretty cool website. I like to go on there sometimes anyway, just to see what's going on. So the information came from a study that was published in the Journal of Natural History. So we have a source, and if you hear any background noises, it's just hiss hiss. She's waking up from a nap right behind me. I think she's just shifting around to go back to sleep. But anyway, so the study examined how tarantulas interact with other animals. It showed that they're not as antisocial as we may think. I think that in terms of what we know about tarantulas in the hobby, at least, the popular opinion is that unless it's a communal species, tarantulas do not like to hang out with anybody. They're very solitary creatures, and entering their space means that you are going to get into some sort of territorial match to the death. But this is actually kind of disproving that in a really cool way. The study said that they've actually been found living alongside amphibians, reptiles, whip spiders, and harvestmen all over the world. Generally, what we've thought about is if a tarantula is tolerating some sort of species and co-living, which I think we thought was pretty rare, but maybe not as rare as we thought now. Generally, it's because there's some sort of beneficial thing going on between the species. And I think that this was kind of brought to light when there was a viral internet post about tarantulas keeping frogs as pets, because people had observed spiders and amphibians sharing a burrow or a living space. And it was kind of suggested that it was an example of mutualism, where the frog benefits from shelter and protection from the tarantula, and as its rent, kind of, or to keep its place in the burrow, it would eat problematic insects, ants, and other parasites that the tarantula's prey attracts, which might actually be harmful to the tarantula and its offspring. If you hear something in the background, please ignore it. It's just one of Hiss's many toys. She has a million toys that all make different sounds because she has a lot of energy. She's my kitten, and they just randomly go off at different times. So yeah, the tarantulas were seen and observed to be hanging out with frogs or toads in that kind of mutual relationship, but that's not just about frogs anymore. And I'd like to read a direct quote by one of the authors. This is from Dr. Alariza Zamani. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. They said that the study demonstrates that tarantulas are not mindless killers as many might assume. Instead, they are capable of forming mutually beneficial relationships with unlikely partners, and these interactions are much more complex and common than we previously thought. And here's something really interesting that this study also talked about. These different interactions that tarantulas are having with different animals might actually reveal something about their hair. The setae that tarantulas are covered in, or just the different types of hairs that the tarantulas are covered in, which is really, really interesting. The hairs are, many of them are at least, part of a defense strategy. And the authors spoke about that by putting out a hypothesis, which is generally new, I think, that these hairs serve another kind of defense strategy against predatory ants. Apparently, I didn't know this, but predatory ants are a big problem for tarantulas. Tarantulas have been seen hanging by one or two legs from a leaf, or even going underwater to avoid these ants, and they'll do that by using their hairiness to kind of trap air. The hairs are also protective in soft areas of the tarantula's body that are most vulnerable to ant attacks, and the stiff hairs make it harder for the ants to bite and hold on. I think that's very, very interesting. I did not know that ants were that big of a threat, and I learned something new about their hairs. Another thing I didn't know was that tarantulas actually can emit some sort of substance or chemical or whatever. I'll let you know what that is. So the authors suggested that tarantulas may use a chemical defense strategy, which involves epidermal gland openings, and that's based off of observations that cats and dogs sniffing tarantulas will wince and move away from them even if they're not kicking urticating hairs at them. Further research is needed to firm up this hypothesis, but authors were very interested in learning the different tarantulas' defense strategies against these ants. Dr. Zamani actually said another quote that had to do with the hairiness. So they said, "My favorite interspecies interaction is perhaps the one between tarantulas and army ants. The dynamics of this relationship are not well understood, and their encounters are rarely documented despite being common. As we have proposed in our paper, it seems that this interaction plays a crucial role in the evolution of one of the most characteristic features of tarantulas, their hairiness." So I guess what they're saying is the army ants are the ones that go after tarantulas. I'm not sure. But I kind of wish that the authors had put more information about like other instances where tarantulas were living with other species and not necessarily like talking more about like a predatory animal, but I'm sure that there's going to be more on this in the future. The authors are hoping that their findings will encourage further research into tarantula behavior, which we really don't know much about, and particularly about interspecies interactions. I think that's something that I personally would love to see, because one of the things that interests me the most about tarantula keeping is just observing the behaviors of them. And sometimes it's frustrating that because we don't know much about them still. There's very little research on their behaviors and things like that, but at the same time, it's kind of exciting because we are learning. A lot hasn't been found out yet, and so we're kind of learning as we go. So I'm probably going to talk more about this in the future. I may actually look up different examples of tarantulas interacting with those other animals if I can, or maybe even a video about like tarantulas and those ants that do attack them. I don't know. I think that I'd like to look into that a little bit more, because the paper kind of like, it did put out the information, but there's not much detail. Maybe there just wasn't that kind of information there. But anyway, let me know what you think. And if you know anything about other species that tarantulas may be living with or working with, please let me know. And I will see you next week for Tarantula Tuesday. Take care. Bye.